Welcome to episode 76 of the Headspace and Timing podcast, a show brought to you by the Change Your POV podcast network. You've come to the end of September and the last episode in a short series about suicide prevention. In the first week of the series, we talked about developing awareness around suicide. In the second episode, we talked about taking action beyond awareness. Last week, we talked to Robert Stewart from Give an Hour about what's being done to impact veteran suicide today. And now we're going to hear about an innovative organization that's looking to impact the future of veteran suicide prevention. Today's guest is Betsey Mercado of the Objective-Zero app. Just letting you know, you're going to hear a little bit of background noise because me and the Change Your POV team are at the Military Influencer Conference in Orlando, Florida. Here's a short preview of what you'll hear on today's show, and stick around after the conversation to hear us talk about what we heard on today's show.
That stigma is there that the veteran is broken, that every veteran or, combat veteran comes back and they're broken. And my husband, Chris, while at Georgetown, had an interaction with one of his classmates who was actually afraid to speak with Chris about his service because he thought Chris would, snap or break or, So, a part of what we're doing as well is trying to break that stigma.
Welcome to the Change Your POV podcast network. You're listening to Headspace and Timing, a show dedicated to breaking down the stereotypes about veteran mental health. My name's Dwayne France, and I'm a combat veteran of both Iraq and Afghanistan. After I retired from the Army, I took on a new mission as a clinical mental health counselor for my fellow service members. If you served in any branch of the military, you're familiar with the M2 machine gun, the 50 cal. It's one of the most effective weapons in the military's arsenal. If the weapon's headspace and timing wasn't set right, however, it was just a huge useless chunk of metal. Veterans can be rendered inoperable if their headspace and timing isn't set correctly either. That's my goal with this show, to change the way that we think and talk about veteran mental health and reduce the stigma against seeking support. Each week, we'll talk with mental health professionals, veterans, and those who support veterans, service members, and their families. We're going to have real and honest conversations about a topic that most just don't like to talk about, veteran mental health. Let's jump into this week's conversation. Hey everybody, welcome back to Headspace and Timing once again, and as always, we really appreciate you taking the time to listen and learn more about veteran mental health. As you know, September is Suicide Prevention and Awareness Month, and this September, we at Headspace and Timing, the Change Your POV podcast, decided to do a short 4-episode series on suicide prevention, and here we are at the 4th week. We've looked at how to generate suicide awareness, what action steps it takes towards suicide, what the organization Give an Hour is doing to actively impact suicide, and today I wanted to talk about maybe a novel way in sort of the future of suicide prevention and peer support. So I reached out to my friends at the Objective-Zero app. And if you haven't heard of it, shame on you. And by the time you've heard this, we'll have fully informed you about all of it. But I have Betsey Mercado, the co-founder and a co-executive director of Objective-Zero, on the show to talk about what they're doing. Betsey, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate the opportunity to share what we're doing.
It's great. You and I have been talking for a while, as well as Blake and Blake Bassett, and trying to really make a difference in suicide prevention, suicide awareness, and really trying to link peer-to-peer support. But you're doing it in a novel way using technology. So before we get into Objective-Zero, I guess I'd like to give you an opportunity to tell the audience a little bit about yourself and sort of how this all came about.
Absolutely. So I'm Betsey Mercado. I'm one of the co-founders and co-executive director, like you said. I'm a military spouse of about 18 years. My husband, Chris, is currently active duty Army. I have a business degree, and I am currently working on my master's in human services. So as an Army spouse, our family moves around every 2 to 3 years. And so I've been focusing pretty much all of my time on volunteering. I've spent a lot of time volunteering with military families and service members. I've led 4 different family readiness groups, FRG groups, and I really understand the importance of taking care of soldiers and their families. It was a philosophy that Chris and I both share. Those family support groups not only improve the readiness of the unit, but also builds that resiliency and then that support system when the service member or is training or deployed. Just having that support system is so beneficial. As it relates to suicide, I was affected by suicide as a high schooler. Several of my classmates took their lives within a very short span of time. And then a cousin of mine also took his life. And looking back, I've lost more people I know to suicide than any other cause. So I think that's what drives me, Chris, and then all the other members of the Objective Zero team to support others that are dealing with suicide or mental illness or whatever, because suicide can be prevented. As it relates to how Objective Zero came about, it was in the fall of 2014, and one of our co-founders, Justin Miller, was having a really hard time with transitioning out of the military. He had served for about 11 years and was medically retired. He was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress, was experiencing the effects of traumatic brain injuries and some other medical issues, and he was suicidal. And he reached out for help, and they told him they could get him in for an appointment in 2 days. Chris served with Justin in Iraq, and that very same day that Justin made that phone call, Chris reached out to him by phone. He had seen that something was off with Justin's social media and just reached out. And the two of them talked for about 6 hours overnight. And, Justin was able to share his story, and Chris simply listened. Chris is an infantryman. He doesn't have any mental health training outside the ACE training that he received in the Army. And so it sparked this idea that the simple act of listening can save lives. Chris was at Georgetown at the time and recruited a bunch of his classmates, to include Blake Bassett, Amy Eastman, Kayla Bailey, and myself. And we wanted to replicate that phone call between Chris and Justin on a grander scale using technology. And so from that came the idea for the Objective Zero app.
So, and that's it's one thing that we've heard over each of these 4 episodes over this past month is that typically someone is impacted by suicide. Now, as you've mentioned, many people lose more of their family members, friends to suicide than almost any other cause, especially in the younger years. But there's a personal connection to someone, either we've lost someone, or as in Justin's sake, conducted a near intervention or an intervention that prevented a suicide. Do you find that that's a theme as you go around talking to people about this, that people's personal stories being impacted by suicide connect them more to Objective Zero in your mission?
Absolutely. Many of our ambassadors predominantly are all service members or veterans themselves. And yes, that's a common theme that we hear, that people are affected by suicide, and, they are losing more friends and battle buddies to suicide than any other cause, not, training accidents or combat related deaths. So, Chris was at Georgetown and had this idea of how do we scale these one-on-one peer-to-peer conversations between him and Justin. How do we, again, leverage technology to put that out on a wider scale? So what is the Objective Zero app, and sort of how does it work? I'd love to share about that. Everyone has a smartphone in their hand. It's something that most people have access to. So the Objective Zero app went live in December of 2017, and we offer veterans, service members, their families, and their caregivers access to not only wellness resources and tools, but also the ability to instantly and anonymously connect to a nationwide network of their peers, and we call them ambassadors. And that's done through text, voice, or video chat. The really cool thing about the Objective Zero app is that our users can filter who they want to speak to, and that can be based on their age, their gender, the branch of the military that they served in, or even where they deployed to receive that peer support. And we've partnered with Headspace. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they offer a free one-year subscription to their meditation app. And we've also partnered with Comeback Yoga, and they've provided video yoga content to our users as well, and it's specifically for veterans. And we've made some other partners to share their resources with our users. We partner with Give an Hour, AmVets, and Vets for Warriors. We're not mental health professionals, and we don't claim to be. And so we want to make sure that our users have access to more professional support should they need it and when they need it.
You see, and that's one thing that I've always been encouraged from the very beginning, as we, Blake and I had talked about this, is that recognizing that it's not a one-stop shop, it's not an all solution. It wasn't just Chris's conversation with Justin, and then Justin was all better, right? There had to be some follow-up. So just talking to a peer, while it is very effective, often it can't stop there. And so the idea of Objective Zero being clinically informed and supported by clinicians and having people involved who are clinically based, that's a critical aspect of what you're trying to do.
Absolutely. You're one of our advisors, and we have Dr. Craig Bryan from the University of Utah's Center for Veteran Studies on board as well. So we're not running blind here. We've got some professionals that are supporting us along the way because our whole co-founding team, we're connected to the military in some way, whether active duty, a veteran, or a family member of one, but we do not have that professional mental health education or experience.
So a lot of times, people will say, okay, it's good, veterans are talking to veterans or military is talking to military. But a lot of times an untrained peer can do more harm than good. Another thing that I value about Objective Zero, someone can't just sign up and all of a sudden start talking to somebody. You actually do have a process through which your ambassadors go through some training.
That's right. So our ambassadors can be anyone that's willing to help. Like I said before, a majority are current service members or veterans, but our ambassadors sign up. And we're able to talk to them and see who they are, and we also go through several different training options. So we've partnered with the VA, and they've provided their Operation Save training. It's kind of our gatekeeper training, that basic knowledge of some of the symptoms and the signs that someone is in need or maybe suicidal, and how to deal with that. And then we've also partnered with Psych Armor, and they offer some amazing training to people that already know how to talk to a veteran, but there's video trainings on how to talk to a veteran, how like the issue of suicide within the military, some of the military jargon that civilians may not be accustomed to, and just some of the issues that veterans are faced with, to include post-traumatic stress, TBI, depression, and just working with someone in the veteran space, or a veteran that they may be working with, just to understand the issues that veterans may be facing. And then finally, we've our Dr. Craig Bryan has offered crisis response plan training. So many of our ambassadors are able to walk our users through a crisis response plan. So when they are dealing with something that they might be headed down that spiral, that suicidal ideation, they're able to take out their note card that they've completed with our ambassador and see some of the warning signs that they're hitting into kind of that spiral, what they can do to kind of get out of that funk, or, if they're not getting out of that funk, the appropriate numbers, maybe it's a counselor or therapist that they have, whether it's the Veterans Crisis Line or 911, so that they have that plan when they're in crisis to follow and to get the help that they need.
See, and I think, again, that's critically important. Just wanting to help isn't enough. Just having that desire to sort of wade in. I want to keep somebody from dying in an accident, but I'm not a doctor, right? I'm not going to go in and say that I know what I'm going to do if I really don't. And so I think it's critical to be able to have that training and that experience before you actually start to work with somebody who may or may not be in crisis.
Precisely. And another great feature about our app is that we have the National Veterans Crisis Line, 911, right within the app. So if someone is in crisis and needs that support, they don't have to look up the number for the Veterans Crisis Line. They don't need to look up the number for Vets for Warriors. It's right there. They push a button and they're transferred immediately.
So, and again, it's interesting coming from an app, right? And, this could have been a website. It could have been been, as you'd mentioned, Psych Armor. We had Marjorie Morrison on in episode 52 talking about their programs. That's web-based. A Given Hour and their programs are web-based. Why an app, and how did the app development kind of come about for Objective Zero?
That's a great question. We don't want to recreate the wheel. There are suicide hotlines. There are, there are web-based platforms already, but there's no app that does what we're currently doing. And so we saw that gap in accessibility to resources and wanted to fill it. And, tech nonprofits and there's not many, there's about 400 tech nonprofits worldwide. And we're one of them, and not many veteran or nonprofits are currently using technology the way that we are. And so Blake Bassett actually has a lot of background, as well as Kayla Bailey, in technology. And so we've been able to really leverage their knowledge and experience. Blake's helped develop apps in the past. And so we have an amazing design team and app team with Lunar Lincoln out of Nashville that really understand our vision and are able to take our ideas and put them into action.
So now that, and it's been about, you said it was December of 2017, and the app had been in development for quite a while. What kind of response have you been getting, say from the ambassadors or from, some of the veterans who have used the ambassadors as resources? So what's some of the feedback you've been getting?
So we've had ambassadors reach out to us, just so excited that they're helping others. Within the last about a month, we had an ambassador reach out. He was contacted by a homeless veteran, and the veteran was living out of his car and didn't have a place to stay, wanted to go to a shelter, didn't know where to reach out, was looking for a job. And that ambassador was able to help that veteran not only find a shelter, but also find a job. And the two of them are actually still in contact today, based on that relationship that they've built. But I think the nice thing about the app is that veterans can be anonymous. We actually have had several active duty service members that have reached out through our app. They don't want to reach out to other resources because they're afraid they're going to lose their job, their clearance. And, that stigma is still in the military and in the veteran communities. And that's one of the other things we're trying to do is break that stigma that, reaching out is a sign of just self-awareness, that you do need support and you can't do it on your own. We've had very positive reactions overall from our users and ambassadors.
So that anonymity, right? And many people may be listening to this and saying, how can you, keep a veteran from taking their own life if you don't know, where to find them or to send, send welfare checks or things like that. Has there been any pushback about the anonymity aspect of the app?
There actually has been a little bit. Overall, our users on the platform appreciate it because they can reach out and without the fear of knowing, who, they may be reaching out to someone they actually already know, and that ambassador doesn't know that. But we have the ability on our back end to determine where someone is or their location, and our ambassadors have the ability to push their calls through to the Veterans Crisis Line or 911 should that situation arise.
Okay, so it's the anonymity is going from the veteran who may be in crisis and may be wanting to talk and talk this through, and that's anonymous to the ambassador, right? So the ambassadors just say, "Hey, I'm a vet, you're a vet. When did you serve?" These kind of things, and so it's anonymous between the two of them, or at least on the ambassador side. But if there is a critical crisis, then the ambassador has the ability to push that forward and make sure that connecting to the proper echelon is made.
That's correct.
See, I mean, and that's it of course is all very technical, but I think, I mean, this is very, very well thought out.
It is. We want to make sure that we're helping the people that need it, but we also understand our own limitations and competencies. And so we think of ourselves more as a warm line, and that, we're trying to be that bridge between that person that is like, kind of heading down that spiral and the person that's already at that suicidal moment. And so we want to make sure that we're able to aptly support the veteran or our user with the appropriate response and resources.
So the ambassadors, have appreciated the opportunity, and you've heard of veterans coming out. What about in the wider community, maybe in the tech community? I think that when you and I talked last week, that you were in Silicon Valley. I sure wasn't, right? But how is this being received, just in the wider veteran space, or maybe in the tech space?
So earlier this year, we were named as one of the Fast Forward's 2018 cohort. We're one of 10 tech nonprofits that were accepted into this acceleration program. And so beginning the mid-July, Blake and I and some of the other team members have been going to San Francisco every other week to meet with mentors in the tech space as well as the nonprofit space. And so we've been able to show the app to Google developers, and we use the Twilio platform, and we've been able to talk to people from Twilio to improve the app. And leaders in that tech space, having that feedback, and we've had such great feedback from them on using technology to solve the problem of veteran suicide. And many of our mentors have mentioned that this is a solution that could help people outside the veteran community as well. This can help people all throughout the world. And so someday, once we have the funds and the support staff, we can probably go much wider and much broad in helping other segments of the population. And as it relates to like other veteran organizations, we're getting partnership requests daily. We're feeling a lot of interest, not only from the tech sector, but also nonprofits in the veteran space.
So, there definitely is the aspect of what will work with veterans. I mean, we are a small, contained sort of cohort, but we're also representative of the U.S. as a whole. And so, what will work for veterans, not just in this space, but will work for veterans in higher education, will work with other non-traditional students, and what works for veteran homelessness can be applied to homelessness in general. And so, it's encouraging to know that at least in this, in providing proof of concept, to be able to expand that to others. I'd be interested to hear more about, sort of how technology can impact the epidemic of veteran suicide. We hear a lot about AI technology and predictive analytics. One thing that Dr. Brian really has worked on in the past is how certain phrases on social media will alert someone to someone who could be in crisis. So are you receiving anything? You said Google, but is there anything else that you're doing or Objective Zero is doing in that space?
Actually, I'm so glad you asked, because yes, we are. We are working on a suicide preemption algorithm that's patent pending right now. And we're a little bit off from implementing this. We're still collecting some of the data sets to really improve this algorithm. But at some point, this algorithm we can put into the app, and with the user's consent, of course, can take biometric data, text data. If you're searching for certain terms on the internet, if you're for those people that wear like Apple Watches or Fitbits, taking that information from, if I'm someone that works out religiously every day, 7 days a week, and I sleep 8 hours a night, and then all of a sudden, I'm not working out, I'm not sleeping, we'll be able to predict someone's hitting that suicidal ideation before they even are. And we'll have the capacity to reach out to their networks and push notifications and resources to that user to reach out to their network or have their network reach out to them.
Now, see, and that's and obviously, and you did say, with the user's permission. Obviously, this isn't something like Orwell's 1984, where we're just gonna plug ourselves into the internet and go. Although we tend to do that a lot anyway. But it's this idea of the person who may be at most risk is likely the least person to reach out for help. a mentor of mine, Casey Kelly with the Warrior Wellness Alliance. She says that requiring somebody who's in an acute crisis to reach out for help is sort of like requiring somebody with a broken leg to get themselves to the emergency room. It's challenging, and it's interesting to be able to say, hey, if there are certain criteria that we're able to reach out rather than the individual, the veteran family member in crisis, having to reach out when they may be least inclined to do so.
Exactly. And, technology is amazing, and this could have such a great implication on, suicide in general, not just veteran suicide. This technology, it's groundbreaking. And we actually are working with some folks at IBM and Microsoft that are trying to help us develop this AI and the platform and the algorithm. I'm not the tech person on the team, but Blake and Kayla are absolute rock stars when it comes to this stuff and connecting with the right people to make it happen.
So, in the tech space, and this is the interesting thing about Objective Zero, is that it's not just one thing. I mean, you're not just a phone line. It's crossing a lot of different, as you said, you're a nonprofit, you're veteran focused, it's technology. And so hearing how the technology sector embraced this, what about, as suicide experts? Obviously, and while I'm on the advisory team, I am definitely not at the same level as Dr. Brian, but what about like the American Association of Suicidology or other suicide experts? Have you had discussions with them about this and what they consider this platform and this method?
So yeah, we actually have been in contact with Colleen Creighton, who's the executive director of the American Association for Suicidology. We actually linked up last summer in DC, and so she's been a great supporter of ours and a huge advocate. So it's so wonderful having someone in that space that recognizes what we're doing and how it can be beneficial to veterans in this community.
So, and this is some really great stuff. Obviously, it's needed. We talk a lot about sort of veterans, but have you had non-veterans accessing the platform, say family members?
Yes, family members and caregivers. So, as an Army spouse myself, I understand those unique challenges that military spouses and their families face, and and caregivers as well. There's some great support communities out there, but you may not want to reach out for them. You may want to be anonymous. So, as a military spouse, I've really pushed hard to have more than just veterans and service members have access to this platform. Because that new military spouse, I can really help. I've had the experience of being, 18 years old in a different state, far away from home, and some of those challenges, and being able to help that part of the community as well. There really is no research or data to support what spouses and dependents and caregivers. I know that there's higher rates of depression and substance abuse for military spouses, but we have no idea of if there is a problem with military independent suicide and caregiver suicide. The data is not available yet.
No, you're absolutely right. I know you said if there is, but I think that you and I and anyone who's in this space know that there is. But you're right. We haven't been able to find this kind of information. This is actually something that I talked to Robert Stewart from Give an Hour last week about this precisely same thing, and me and some colleagues are looking to connect. But the CDC hasn't been gathering that information. It's a matter of just data collection. And while we may know somebody's a veteran because they have their DD-214, it's just we haven't wrapped our hands around. And even what Robert was talking about last week in the contagion of suicide, you mentioned it earlier about a cluster of your friends in high school that all took their lives within a short period of time. That it's not just the veteran that struggles with these things; it's also the family member, the spouses and children. So it's really encouraging. Not that Objective Zero is involved in trying to define that problem, but address that problem in the way that they can.
Absolutely. It's so important. I think sometimes the family members, the caregivers are overlooked. They make those sacrifices as well. You send your husband, your wife, your son, your daughter, brother, sister, you send them off to war, and, they come home and the reintegration process. And, if you're dealing with the issues of depression or post-traumatic stress or TBI, that family experiences the same things. And so if we're able to connect family members and caregivers to one another as well through this platform, it's just going to build a stronger community within the military community.
No, and that's exactly right. And I try to, bring that out as much as possible, is that my family served just along as I did. My mom, of course, had a different deployment than I did. I heard a colleague explain it that, when I was deployed, when service members are deployed, we know that it's not all danger all the time. But a lot of family members think that the entire deployment's like the first 10 minutes of Saving Private Ryan.
Precisely.
And so we know that we're safe if something happens. I mean, there's times when we're playing Call of Duty or going to the gym or getting a sandwich at the DFAC, but the family members who don't have that immediate feedback are sort of, high stress all the time.
Exactly. And then you have those added responsibilities just being a single parent for that, short amount of time during that deployment, and, kids act out and the toilet breaks or the dishwasher break. It's just, Murphy's Law. When it rains, it pours. And so having that community to reach out to is, I think, just as important as the veteran and service member community.
So, and even as we're having this conversation and the audience is listening, but I'm curious, have you reached out to the Elizabeth Dole Foundation and seen what support you can provide to caregivers? Because that's much of their focus.
Yeah, so we've been in contact with the Elizabeth Dole Foundation as well as the Red Cross military veteran caregiver network as well. So yes, we're definitely pursuing those different options to let them know that we exist and that our platform is available. One of the things we're actually going to be integrating within the app, hopefully within the next 6 weeks to 8 weeks, is the ability to have an affiliation within that filter. So if I'm affiliated with the Elizabeth Dole Foundation, I can use that affiliation on my profile. And so if a caregiver uses our app and wants to reach out to someone that has that experience, they can filter that through into specific nonprofits or organizations that are there to support them.
I can imagine affiliations with Team RWB, Team Rubicon, Mission Continues, as well as the Legion or the VFW or things like that.
Exactly. That we're hoping that happens, and our goal is to reach every single veteran and family member, just so that they know that this resource is available. And we don't want to be known as, the suicide prevention app. We want to make sure that we're building a community within the app so that, someone has this downloaded before they actually need it. So we're hoping, our partnerships with Headspace and yoga and hopefully we have some more in the works right now. We'll bring people onto the platform before they need it.
And I think, this is critical, right? I mean, it's building awareness, it's starting the conversation, and it's getting the message out there, like you said, before it's actually necessary.
Exactly. I can't imagine that anyone that is maybe in that crisis moment or, really struggling is going to go to the App Store and download the app. So we're trying to make it more we're trying to just make it so that people have it before they need it.
Right. And I think, of course, speaking from the military mindset, we don't just train for combat the minute that we set foot on ground. Right. So we train when we're not in danger so that we can be prepared when it does actually happen. And so, and I think this is a challenge when it comes to suicide prevention and even mental health in general, is people see the services that we provide as something that happens to avoid crisis or during crisis or even post-crisis, instead of actually something that we can do to get ahead of this. So, we can build resilience ahead of time, and you can have that and catch that suicidal ideation continuum before it gets to the dangerous end.
That's right. And I think, that stigma is there that the veteran is broken, that every veteran or, combat veteran comes back and they're broken. And, my husband, Chris, while at Georgetown, had an interaction with one of his classmates who was actually afraid to to speak with Chris about his service because he thought Chris would, snap or break or,
Mm-hmm.
So, a part of what we're doing as well is trying to break that stigma because, not every person who's dealing with issues, it's not it may not always be mental health. It might be a financial issue or a relationship issue. It's not always post-traumatic stress or TBI. That's a very small percentage of the veteran population that's dealing with those things. So I think access to, a variety of different resources from relationships to financial to mental health, if you have that available at the touch of a button in your hand, will hopefully help you from hitting those points of crisis.
That's a heck of a vision, Betsey.
I'm a big dreamer. Our whole team is a big dreamers. So
what do you see? You talked a little bit about maybe applications outside the veteran space, but what do you see as a vision for Objective Zero in the future?
We really want to build a community within the app and take that civilian military divide and kind of break that. Less than 1% of our country is currently serving. And so that division has never been higher. So there's so many civilians that want to help. They want to do something more than just, oh, thank you for your service, which, we hear that veterans are very uncomfortable every time they hear that. They don't know how to respond. And so, if we can get civilians on our platform as ambassadors that are willing to talk if someone needs it, and bridging those gaps and just breaking the stigma that, seeking help is weak or, that you're broken. We have a lot of different visions for this.
No, I think it's great. I am a huge supporter and have been from the beginning. I think it indicates the busyness of both of our lives that it's taken us this long to be able to get on an episode of the show. But I think what you're doing is amazing.
Thank you so much, and we're grateful for your support.
So if someone were to want to find more about Objective Zero or you specifically, where can they find you on the internet, perhaps social media, things like that?
So you're always welcome to visit our website. It is www.objectivezero.org. We're also very active on social media. Our Twitter handle is @ZeroVetSuicides. And on Facebook and Instagram, we're the Objective Zero app.
Yes, and I think it's always encouraging to see veterans embracing this technology. I mean, it's out there and it's there for a reason, and so I think it's important to be able to leverage this for good rather than just cat videos.
Exactly.
So, anything else that you can think of to leave us with?
Anyone can be an ambassador. I know many of your listeners are mental health professionals, and so we encourage anyone with that background to reach out to us and give us feedback on how we can improve the app, better improve our training for ambassadors, and just provide that support. We're always looking for other nonprofits to partner with and share their resource, and they can share ours, and share the Objective Zero app with the veterans and their family members in your lives. I think spreading awareness of what we're doing is great, and we're grateful for your support, Dwayne, and you're an incredibly strong voice for not just veterans, but also Objective Zero. And we're really grateful for your support and your expertise on this.
No, I appreciate it too. I think it's fun. I actually had somebody reach out to me the other day and send me the Objective Zero, said, "Hey, have you heard about this?" I was like, well,
exactly.
As a matter of fact, yes, but I'm glad that it's coming back around. So let the team know that we really appreciate all the hard work and hopefully that with all of us and with all of this effort, we will actually get to that objective, zero vet suicide.
That's our goal, and we're going to keep working for it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dwayne.
You're listening to Headspace and Timing on the Change Your POV Podcast Network. Yeah, so we just got done with that conversation with Betsey Mercado talking about the Objective Zero app. That's some pretty great stuff. I really appreciate Betsey coming on the show. Usually after these shows, I'll wrap up and give you some thoughts. But as I mentioned before, we're here at the Military Influencer Conference in Orlando, Florida. So I got my buddy Eddie Lazary in the person, in the flesh.
In the flesh, yes, and blood, yes. Here I am.
But Eddie just took some time to check out the show, and I figured that it would be good for us to be able to talk about the show, talk about what Eddie's response to sort of what Betsey was talking about. So you heard it. What do you think, Eddie?
Yeah, I think it's an incredible platform and idea and concept. Number one, the fact that they've converted it into an app. That's one of the biggest things, I think, is access, right? Barriers of entry and having the ease of access to those that need it or want to use it. So they've got it's an app. It's available on iOS and Android. You can download it and start to use it. And having everything right there at your fingertips, it's nice because, as an ambassador or as somebody that wants to reach out and connect to somebody, you don't have to wait till you get home to a desktop PC or something like that. You can do it all right from your phone. So I think it's an incredible concept. The other thing that I really like about this whole idea is the fact that you can sign up as an ambassador. You can get some training all done online, and you don't need to be. I mean, if you've got the desire and you want to help, this gives you a perfect opportunity to be able to do that with the guidance of people like you, the professionals in the field. But you don't necessarily have to be a professional to be able to donate your time and be able to help somebody in need, right?
Yeah, no, and that's you're talking about the accessibility. It's our phones aren't any more than 8 inches from ourselves the entire day, right? It's in our pocket, and they call it the remote control to the world. And I think it's a really amazing way to bring the conversation about suicide prevention. You don't have to be a professional, and it's right there.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's just not enough actual professionals out there, I don't think. I mean, you guys are there, you're out there, but you're not in the force, in the numbers that are needed to answer the problem that is out there, right? I mean...
Yeah, well, and the thing is we're not going to be the ones that are going to be coming across somebody in the first place.
Right.
It's there's the gatekeepers, and so it's more likely that someone in crisis is going to come in contact with a friend, sort of like how, Justin and Chris, when Chris saw that Justin was having some challenges on Facebook and he reached out. So it's usually going to be a friend, it's going to be a spouse, it's going to be a police officer, it's going to be a medical professional, right? So a veteran comes into the emergency room or something. Very rarely is a mental health professional going to be the first person that they're in contact with when it comes to suicide crisis.
Yeah, and I think I liken it to our training in the military, right? So before we deployed to Iraq, everybody in my platoon went through the CLS, or Combat Lifesaver Training. We all learned how to provide first aid, how to give an IV, how to apply a tourniquet, how to, all those good, wonderful things. Nobody was going to do mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, so you can forget that. But but we were all trained in first-level care. And then, of course, we had our medics that were more, trained at a higher level of care. And then we had our, our aid stations, or like a third-tier aid station. And then, ultimately we had the cash, or the hospital there in the green zone. So, and I think that's been one thing that's attributed it to a lot of the life-saving practices of our military today, is being able to get care at the lowest level possible sooner than later. And I think veteran mental health is, with this app, can almost apply that same type of mentality, where this app, like you said, will give me the necessary training to be a combat lifesaver, right? But it will also give me the ability to then hand that person off to the next care level.
Yeah, and that goes back to the conversation that we had with Sally Spencer Thomas a couple episodes ago, where, we'll slow down and we'll see a wreck on the side of the highway, and then we're like, oh man, maybe we should do something, but I'm not a professional. I'm not the guy that should do anything, and so we end up speeding past, and it's not real until it happens to us or somebody that we know. And a lot of times people will avoid having these conversations about suicide prevention or suicidal thought or things like that because we simply don't feel prepared.
Right.
That's what the professionals are for. And so you have the challenge, again, like I said before, you don't come in contact with professionals in the first place, and yet the people you come in contact with don't feel prepared. This is what Betsey and Chris and Blake and the Objective Zero team have done, is to be able to provide that training and get that in the pocket of veterans.
So in your opinion, does this replace like suicide hotlines, things that are already in place today?
No, I mean, and I think it's simply another tool, right? You know, the suicide prevention hotline, so the official national suicide hotline and the VA's thing there, you know, they've got a lot of different ways. They've got text, they've got web-based, they've got the phone number, but you also have programs like Vets for Vets. It's basically a civilian crisis line, and so that's something different, right? Like that's more official. This, I think, is, and you mentioned it before we started talking here, this is more like Veterati. You know, we've talked about Veterati, the mentorship kind of thing. This is very specific towards, not even towards suicide intervention. As Betsey had said, they're trying to build a community around, connecting a veteran to a veteran, but really specifically looking at the mental health piece. This is much more like a community and a conversation and connecting veterans to other veterans. One of the things is, we as veterans don't want to be the ones to get the help. We want to give the help. Right. And the app is a way for them to empower veterans to be able to give help and in turn be helped, because that's one of the things that, you know, that whole purpose and meaning thing, that gives the ambassadors are as fulfilled and they're more mentally healthy and well and resilient because they're providing that service.
Well, one of the things that I think, and this is really new, so I haven't really dug into the app 100% yet, but I've just kind of played around with it a little bit. But one of the things that I would like to see, kind of the next evolution of something like this, would be almost a train-the-trainer idea, where you've got the basic training on there for the ambassadors to then help the end user. But that, I'm thinking, what are your thoughts about having like the ambassadors kind of like the middle level? So now the ambassadors could reach out to individuals like yourself, Dwayne, like, you know, clinical mental health specialists, and continue their knowledge and their training base to be able to become more effective ambassadors to the end user. Almost kind of a middle person or a stopgap between the end user and the professional.
Right, and how, Betsey, this was one of the things that, the whole anonymity thing. If you came on the app and I'm an ambassador and we were connecting, we could be anonymous. And that was originally some of my concern was, you know, what if there really is a veteran in crisis? But then, as she said in the show, well, she has the ability to step in, and the ambassador can essentially, you know, hit a button to reach out and say, you know, there's something more here, and then that individual will be connected to the crisis line in that second tier thing. They are setting that kind of thing up. Dr. Craig Bryan out of the University of Utah, she said, professionals who are actually providing support to the ambassadors. But yes, as you go along, you're going to have some people, just like any organization, right? You're going to have some people just want to be in the trenches and just kind of, stay where they're at. And then you're going to have other ambassadors that really dig into this and become, super ambassadors or super peers. A lot like how Mission Continues has their city impact managers, but then they also have like multi-city impact managers to do that kind of thing. So yeah, it's in the thing here is it's specifically focusing on mental health and wellness, right? It's not just in general, but it's really talking about, it's trying to impact the veteran suicide epidemic. So yeah, I think it's a great stuff.
I do too. And given your experience and in this area, do you have any fears or apprehension about ambassadors that are really zealous and really just truly want to help, but may perhaps overstep their knowledge or technical expertise? Is there any dangers or fear in somebody that just really, really wants to help but might actually provide information or guidance that is counterintuitive to the actual plan or program?
Well, and that goes back to what Bennett and I were talking about on our show at the beginning of the year, is just wanting to be a peer when it comes to mental health. Just wanting to do it isn't enough, right? You need to actually have, number one, you need to have gone through it and come out the other side yourself. Because if I'm sitting there bleeding out and I'm trying to help you. If you're bleeding out, I got to take care of myself. I got to make sure that I'm stable before you're stable. And so there is danger in just the general thing. Everybody, every veteran wants to help, but not having the understanding, not having the basics of that. And again, that's something that they do. It's you sign up as an ambassador tomorrow. You're not talking to a veteran within an hour. You actually have to go through a series of training before they turn you on and set you loose or what have you.
Right.
And again, this is what they're doing as far as making connections. You heard it last week with Give an Hour on, the big tent philosophy. They're using Psych Armor, they're using Give an Hour, they're using different organizations to help make sure that their ambassadors are understanding, what you can do and what you can't do, because that's the limit, right? If I think that, if your combat medic, for example, think that he's a tier 3 trauma surgeon, then something bad's going to happen.
Right. Yeah.
If you just get out of the way, doc, I've got this.
Let's
right?
crack the chest right here.
I'm a combat lifesaver.
Right.
and there is the danger in that, but that comes into the awareness of the ambassadors to say, hey, look, I know what I can do, and I'm confident in what I can do, and when it gets beyond what I can do, I need to pass this along.
And so we're closing out on September here, which, as we both know, is September has been earmarked as the suicide prevention or awareness month, and great conversations you've had all month long around this topic. My question is a month of awareness enough? Are the programs that are out there that exist today enough? Is this an app like this going to be enough? Is anything ever going to be enough to really make the necessary impact to truly and honestly reduce the number of suicides that our veteran community is experiencing?
I don't think anything is going to be enough, but there's the chance where everything can be enough, right? If we have all of these different things, this is simply another tool for a veteran to be able to use it, right? Again, the suicide prevention hotline or the websites or the Headspace and Timing blog and podcast. I think collectively that's what's going to do it, because just like suicide has no one reason, right? There's not any one thing. It's not all PTSD. It's not all substance abuse. It could be a number of different things, and so there are a number of different solutions. I think that number one, getting all the solutions around will do something. But the other piece is veterans just need to reach out, right? A mentor of mine, she says that having somebody who's in crisis requiring them to reach out is sort of like somebody with a broken leg getting themselves to the emergency room, right?
Yeah.
We have to be able to get these conversations out into the wider consciousness. Outside of National Suicide Prevention Month, the only time where conversations happen is when high visibility suicides occur, right? We talked, you and I, and the group of us were talking last year, Chris Cornell and Chaz Bennington, and then of course when Robin Williams, or earlier this year with Kate Spade and Anthony Bourdain. That's sort of the rubbernecking, that when high visibility crisis happens, somebody comes in, but then the conversation dies down. So the month, especially, this gives us in the mental health community an opportunity to talk about it, so it raises it in people's consciousness. But it goes back to the first conversation. We're aware of it. Yeah, we can raise awareness about it, but we have to take action beyond the awareness.
Yeah, and to me, the conversation dies down and the awareness kind of drips away. To me, it dies down and people forget much, much sooner than one might think, too. Even high-profile type of suicides. It's just, the way that the media news cycle exists today, something that's really big in the news and makes front-page news today, literally, 10, 15 years ago might be in that news cycle for a week or two or more. Now, you're lucky if it's, talked about the next day.
Perfect example is we're coming up on the 1-year anniversary of the Mandalay Bay shooting.
Right.
How long ago does it seem like that happened?
God, it seemed like years ago. Right.
And it's not even been a year since that happened. And so this we talk about the 24-hour news cycle and everything else, but everything happens so much, it's in our consciousness. And then it just and it does seem like a long time. So much has happened in our lives. And so the awareness around 20 a day, 22 a day veteran suicide, the awareness is there, right? We talk about it. Everybody knows something. Like Betsey said in the conversation, most of the ambassadors have been personally touched by suicide. We've all lost more people to suicide, more veterans to suicide than we have to combat that kind of thing. So we all know about it, but then it's what do we do about it? And I think this app is something, it's a way for a veteran or a family member or somebody who cares to do something, to take action. And that's the only way we're going to stop it. We can sit here and say, hey, I'm tired of standing in the rain, but until you put up an umbrella, you're going to continue to get wet. Yeah. So it's a way to take action. And so that's what I think this and all the other awareness things, moving from awareness to action, that's what's going to make a difference.
Yeah. And I think the other thing too is so many people focus on suicide as the problem. Suicide is a result of other problems or bigger problems, right? And I think, if we're only to have a conversation around suicide, I don't think we're going to get very far. We need to kind of almost reverse engineer that and take a few steps back and say, let's talk about the things that got this person there, right? Is it loss? Is it the lack of feeling of having something in your life that's bigger than you? We often talk about having purpose. Is it substance abuse? Is it addiction? Is it,
right.
There's so many things, right?
It is. It's all that thing, the boot camp series and the comprehensive veteran mental health. Veteran suicide is a symptom of an underlying unresolved problem, right? And I, as a mental health professional, I need to be able to understand what that source is, right? If you go into the doctor and you have a runny nose, I as the doctor would have to determine, is it the flu or is it allergies? Because I'm going to treat those two things differently. So if you come in a suicidal crisis because of substance abuse or because your wife left you, is different than a suicidal crisis because it's an anniversary of something happened. And so people who are dealing with the veteran suicide, we can't just say we're going to stop veteran suicide. We actually have to address that underlying thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very
so this is great. I really appreciate you taking the time to kind of wrap this up with me. We could probably create another episode just talking about
right?
that. But
that was great. I think what Betsey's doing with Objective Zero, and again, you can go find out more at objectivezero.org. Right there is the links where you can download the app, both iOS and Android. I think I heard somebody say the other day, and it's very true. 20 minutes of doing something is worth way more than 20 hours of thinking about doing something. So go out there and do something.
Get it done.
Yep. Well, thanks for having me on, Dwayne. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. We're going to keep talking about this.
Yeah.
I'd like to thank the Change Your POV Podcast Network for hosting this show and highlighting the critical importance of veteran mental health. We want to hear from you. You can reach out to me via email at dwayne@veteranmentalhealth.com. You can find me at Twitter @TheCounselingVet, or head on over to Facebook and look for the Change Your POV Squad. You can find the show notes for this episode and all the episodes by going to veteranmentalhealth.com or changeyourpov.com. Sign up for updates on either or both so you don't miss another episode. While you're at it, check out the other great shows on the Change Your POV Podcast Network. The show about remembering our military history and reviving our warrior spirit, changing hearts and minds. The show about outdoor activities that us veterans love so much, Neophyte in the Woods. The show that helps us get going at the beginning of the week, Motivation Monday. And Attack Fridays, the show that brings you actionable tips, tricks, and coachable knowledge to help you make the best of your transition. While you're checking out the other shows, drop us a review in iTunes or whatever podcast platform you're listening to. The reviews really help spread the word about what we're doing. If you're looking for the total package for all the information you need to live the life you want after leaving the military, you found it. If you know of a buddy who's looking for the same info, share it with them so they can find it too. I want to thank Doc Todd for his permission to use his track Not Alone from his amazing album Combat Medicine. Doc Todd is somebody who's trying to bring veteran mental health out of the darkness and into the light, and you can get the album by going to therealdoctodd.com. Check it out, because remember, veterans, you're not alone. Ever.
The struggle is real, found a feast and lost a soul. Eventually my drinking, it got out of control. There in darkness I roam, struggling to find home. See, suddenly death didn't feel so alone. 22 a day, destination unknown. It could have been avoided if you picked up the phone, but now you're gone, so I guess all we get is the tone. Nothing but bone weeds responsibility.
Oh, I try so hard to have faith.
Amen.
I bow my head and I pray.
Keep praying.
Lord, please lend me the strength to carry on and keep standing.
Stand up.
How this life so demanding, so much pain on this planet. I hurt each time I wait,
Tell 'em, man.
but with you I'm not alone.
Not alone. You're not alone.
Ah, yeah. And every time that I fall, I'ma call on you, pick myself back up again.
Without my Georgia girls, yeah, I'd probably be dead. Cause I'd be taking every med that the VA said. Gave every shred, every last thread of my identity. Conquer my fragility, eliminate the enemy. Deliver me, God, from temptation. Tell me that this life is just a matrix. Need a facelift, back to basics. Vision Lasix, I only feel alive when I hear the bass kick.
Oh, I try so hard to have faith.
Amen.
I bow my head and I pray.
Keep praying.
Lord, please lend me the strength to carry on and keep standing.
Stand up.
How this life so demanding, so much pain on this planet. I hurt each time I wait, but with you I'm not alone.
Not alone. Yeah. You're not alone.
Ah, yeah. And every time that I fall,
Come
I'ma
on.
call on you, pick myself back up again.
Yeah, just pick up the phone, you're not alone. Just pick up the phone, you're not alone, man. Just pick up the phone, you're not alone. Yeah, pick up the phone, I'm right here. And I love you guys. Take those bottles out, dog, and pour them in the sink. Take the needles out your arm and the gun away from your forehead. It's time, man, you've been through enough pain, stand up. It's time to stand back up. All my veterans, man, Army, Marine Corps, Navy, Air Force, Coast Guard. Get up, you know.
Oh, I try